councillors, it is 5:30. We will get this agenda briefing started. Thank you, and thank you, staff members and member of the public for joining us. For those who haven't been to agenda briefing before, this isn't a council decision process. This is an opportunity for us to go through next week's agenda and ask any questions should we have them. We do have the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Smith, online. Councillor Smith, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Mr. Mayor.
Good, and I hope you're feeling better. Might just ask if you just have that on mute, just so there's no background noise while we're ticking along, Trez.
Certainly.
Councillor Smith, and if you have any questions, just pop
Certainly.
it off.
I'll put on mute now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, besides that, the rest of us are all here. No. Councillor Steck? That's not her, Councillor Steck's bag? Okay. I'm not sure if we've heard from Councillor Steck. I did. Yeah. No worries. We will work our way through the agenda as written. Before I do that, are there any declarations of interest for tonight's council meeting? Councillor Andrew?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. It was just in relation to the policy for memorials, as I have a impartiality as I'm a board member of the Bunbury Cemetery Board.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew will stay in the room for that agenda. Any other declaration of interest, councillors? Thank you. And the CEO just noted we did have an apology from Director Andrew McRobert. We do have Barbara in his replacement. Thank you for joining us. Moving along. Thanks, Councillor Steele. 10.1.1, review of council policy sustainability. Any questions on this, councillors? I didn't ask her to, but I may just, if she does want to put him on the spot, the chair of the of our policy and review committee, Councillor Quain. You are the chair, aren't you, Councillor Quain? I haven't asked you previously, but if you wanted to make any comments around the policy committee, obviously you had your meeting last week and most of the policies are in here in this agenda, but was there any other comments you wanted to make? I normally do give that chair the opportunity. Anything? Thanks, Councillor Quain. Apologies. Next time I'll give you a bit more warning. Item 10.1.1, any questions on this? Thank you. There's a range of policies here, councillors. 10.1.2. 10.1.3. 10.1.4. Councillor Gassett.
The tree management policy. Mr. Chair, I just got a question about risk management, where you have trees that might have branches that are potentially or have fallen on private property, and how this policy might deal with that. I did notice a change, but I'm just wondering whether someone might be able to provide clearer detail in a situation like that, which is current at the moment.
Sure. CEO, and then maybe just a following question as well. Obviously, this is opposed to the tree retention policy we have as well, and how they work hand in hand. CEO, if you've got an answer for that, might be good.
Thanks, Mayor. So I think the question from Councillor Gassett is around the city's risk in relation to trees, to branches potentially falling. Is that correct, Councillor Gassett? Yeah. So I might ask the Acting Director of Infrastructure if she wanted to make a comment in relation to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, if you go to section 1.3, it says it will reduce proven risk or harm to persons or properties. So we've picked it up through that area there.
Answer your question, Councillor Gassett.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I was aware of it, I just wanted to highlight it.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Further questions on this one? 10.1.5. Thank you. 10.1.6. Thank you. 10.3.1. Thank you. 10.3.2. We'll deal with that next week. Was there any questions on this one, councillors? Thank you. Oh. CEO, comment?
Thanks, Mayor. I was just going to make a comment around the committees, and I'm not quite the understanding of this committee, but it's probably relevant when we look at the reduction in members on council as we move forward. But we will bring back a report about the review of our committee structure and some of our working groups as well, because with 9 elected members, we're going to need to be mindful of how we want to spread elected members' time across various committees. So whilst this one's fine in its own right, it's probably something to bear in mind as we move forward after the next election.
And I think obviously this being an external committee, we're committed to their timing. And from memory, it's on a Monday, about Monday mid-morning. I know Councillor Steele's been on that, and it's very difficult for those who are working to get to those meetings. And I know Deputy Mayor Councillor Smith's been on that for a number of times prior as well. There you go, it's right there. Third Monday, 12 till 2. So if anyone can give that some thought, that'd be good. As the CEO just indicated, we will be reviewing all of these groups at some stage. They've obviously requested we have an elected member on there, but it's not, we don't need to. It's just nice to have, and we might, if somebody has a thought around how we do that. I know one of the comments I've mentioned previously is perhaps rather than having a councillor on that board, we just have somebody to go along on a 6-monthly basis for an update or council update or something along those lines. So give that some thought next week. If somebody's available at those times and keen to be on, great. If not, we might just want to think about how else we can continue to work with this group. Councillor Steele?
I think Councillor Turner's already the deputy, so I don't know if unless you've stepped down whether we have to have a deputy again. I don't know. Sorry.
Councillor Turner?
Yeah, unfortunately I couldn't make the times due to work commitments, and I did give them some times that I was available, but obviously they don't want to change the time, so that's why they come back to us for new members.
Sure. Well, good. We'll deal with that next week, and might just think about if nobody, I'm not asking now, but if there isn't anyone who sort of is indicating, we might just have a think about how we might want to just raise up some kind of alternative to that. Great, thank you. 10.3.3 is a rate exemption application. Councillor Andrew?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a query. It's got in noted all rate exempt properties are reviewed on a 2-yearly basis. How are those reviewed?
CEO?
Thank you, Mayor. I might just, we've got the Manager of Finance, David Ransom there. I'll just get David to answer that question.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The rate staff go through that. They shoot out a renewed application form to all the properties, and they have to provide the appropriate documentation to show that they're still exempt under the Local Government Act.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Follow-up. I'm assuming then that is done through delegated authority. Does it come back to council for a second time?
CEO?
Again, I'll ask the Manager of Finance to answer that.
It's more of an administrative process rather than a delegated authority, and we will conduct that review in November this year.
Councillor Andrew?
I notice now we're creeping up to 434 properties, which is nearly 1 in 40 properties in the City of Bunbury is rate exempt. Do we have a breakdown of what types of charities these properties are rate exempt for housing, churches, those? And also to that, do we have any data from other cities or shires, I guess, on the number of rate exempt properties out there, or does Walga?
Sure. CEO?
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Andrew, for the question. It's something we discussed today. We certainly can provide the information that you've requested, Councillor Andrew, and as you know, we do from time to time write to the Minister responsible around the issue of rate exemptions, then the impact of the city, and there is certain, and certainly capital cities that face that. I know at Bayswater, being just on the outskirts of Perth, they had a lot of properties, a lot of rate exempt properties for people who were trying to service Perth, but living not in the CBD and paying, the same price to the CBD. So there's probably maybe some thinking. I know in the Local Government Act reform, there was plenty of discussion around whether council should make that decision around rate exemptions, or whether it should be prescribed in the Act as it currently is. And there was mixed views on that. Some groups liked the fact that government had that in legislation and them not having to make that decision, versus others that were more, keen to have a greater say. I think there's probably, one approach that we might want to consider is to think about, when you do get that data, is what's reasonable from a percentage of your rate base, and is there a maximum that any local government should be asked to, from a rate exemption point of view. And so that's probably something we can certainly raise with Walga, but we'll get the data and then we can have that discussion.
Thank you. And Councillor Steele did have a question. Just a follow-up though. Was that? If
Yeah.
you're following up on the question, Councillor.
Sorry. I guess, Southwest Refuge is obviously one that we would want to support, but acknowledging again that 1 in 40 properties has that. I guess is the CEO aware that the City of Mandurah has about a $2 million loss with twice the budget, so nearly on par with the City of Mandurah?
I'll take that more of a statement, Councillor Andrew, but we'll get that data presented, and then also might be worth that getting some information on what we've written previously to local government, and maybe how we look at a different tact this time around. Councillor Steele?
That was basically what I would like to have asked, whatever, or what Councillor Andrew asked as well.
Breakdown?
I think I do ask it every time about how much money we are losing. And so if, for example, I know Southwest Refuge has 1, but then they have 10 other things, like, so is there a chance of limiting that they can only have, and also writing again to try and get this money? Because if
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think all we need, it's probably that wide at a conversation. As I said, at the moment, there's no limit. So anyone, the Local Government Act outlines that obviously they can apply, and we don't have the authority to not approve them under the current Act, but it has to come to us through this process. So we probably just need to have a think about how we want to position ourselves in terms of what the best way forward. I know it comes up in Walga zone meetings. I know it's come up at RCA WA that we're part of, but there doesn't seem to be much movement. So maybe we can also, part of the data, just have a look at previous council decisions when we've had an additional point made in there to write to the Minister to review this. But yeah, maybe that hasn't worked previously, so maybe we might be able to think about some other ways we might be able to look at that.
So what would happen if we did refuse?
So if we refused it, the applicant would then obviously just can take it to SAT, and there's no, similar to when we've had a previous decision through here where there was a different policy around phone towers, which indicates that here's the state government policy, this is what you need to abide by. Even though we were the determining factor, this would be the same case. So unless there was a clear reason that we could go against local government legislation, which would only be proving that they weren't a not-for-profit, I guess, which would be very difficult to do.
I just make a comment that I wasn't saying that
Sure.
we wanted to reduce.
Absolutely, and I think that's very clear. No elected member here is suggesting any rates shouldn't not be exempt that are being put forward. It's the way it is done, and yes, and it's the $1.7 million in rates. Councillor Ramesh first, I think, had a question, and then Councillor.
No, I think Councillor Steele has asked the same question. I was going to ask what happens if we refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Gasson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Try not to enter a debate here. So if we are going to be provided with information about the 1 in 40 exempt non-rate payers, can we also consider the input these organisations have into the economy, into the GDP or gross domestic products of our local community, and if we were not to give them the exemptions, where they might drift off somewhere else and we might lose income and services in the community?
I'll take the first part as a question. I get your statement there, Councillor Gasser, and it's probably a wider conversation. I doubt we'll be able to readily provide that kind of data. The question was asked if we could get a breakdown of what the services were from that, which I believe we should be able to provide for next week. That wider question, I can ask the CEO, but I don't believe we'd be able to get that data anytime soon, Councillor Gasser.
So, Mayor, if I can probably, so you've got before you a report around rate exemption, that's one issue. We will need to do some work to get the information around other councils. So we can certainly get the information around the number of properties that we've got, but the further debate around and discussion around other councils and the relativity of their rate exemptions to their rate base will take a little bit more for us to do. And I think, you know, then you look at Councillor Gasser's question around the economic impact of those is obviously another consideration. And, you know, regional capital cities do provide some of those services because they are that hub, you know, for the region. And so having those services located closer to us is also beneficial. So I think, you know, there probably is a different way to cut it, to have that discussion with government around what's reasonable and whether there should be a maximum that any local government should pay, and then maybe, you know, seeking support from state government to adjust other mechanisms that might be able to provide some relief for those that have over that that maximum, for want of a better word. The only other way is that the legislative reform which government's tried, and there was mixed views around whether it should be in legislation or it shouldn't.
Councillor Steele.
So how long, this is because this is obviously not got to do with these people at all, it's about the whole
System,
thing.
yep.
So how long has rate exemption sort of occurred? Has it occurred since state or the federal government have basically cost shifted and privatised these sort of industries? Is that how it occurred? I want to go that.
Yep.
I'd
Do
like
we
to
have
know.
do we have an idea of when applications for rate exemptions came in?
Not sure, but I think, as I said before, it might be good for us to provide the information that we can prior to next week, but I think there's a bigger piece of work that needs to be done, and that's probably part of a council resolution that we can, or, you know, you can ask me to do administratively if that's what you want to do, Mayor. But if you want a council resolution, we could probably prepare something that you know, an elected member could move either next week or at a future meeting, so that we can get this on the table and do the work that we need to do to at least raise this issue in a different way with state government.
Sure. There's a couple of questions I noticed there which we can have some responses for before next week. As is indicated, there's nothing, the executive recommendation is written there. It's very hard to change in any way, unless, but obviously if there's a second part to review further works, then obviously that might be considered next week. I would encourage any elected members, once that data comes through, to work with officers around that and getting a part 2 to be added or raised as a potential amendment. Further questions? (10.3.4). There is a confidential report here, councillors, so I don't plan to go behind closed doors at this stage, but if anyone has any questions around the report itself, we may have to. All okay? Thank you. 10.3.5, schedule of accounts paid. Thank you. 10.4.1. Any questions? All okay? Very good. 10.4.2.
Sorry, I do have a question for the one before.
10.4.1.
Because it just doesn't affect this area where people are parking on verges and things. Is there any chance, because when you drive past, there is a lot of people parked on that verge near Aldi. Is there any chance of just putting some bollards or something there too, to stop that, some cement bollards that could maybe go there to stop people parking there as well, because that's quite dangerous on those corners as well. I don't know.
Oh, so, okay, so
Because
this is
I'm
obviously
assuming
around the
what their
park.
effect is.
Well, this is obviously the parking timeframes in the allotted car bays, but you're talking about people parking illegally on the
because
verges?
it goes all along there. I'm assuming that's all the workers. So if you had some sort of
Okay.
thing as well, I don't know.
Yeah, see, this is, that question's obviously around for illegal parking on the reserves and that there. Is the city aware of that happening and is that being followed up?
Yeah, I was over there today, so I didn't really see a lot, but I'm happy to take that on notice and perhaps follow that up for you, Councillor Steele, with Mark Allies and get a response back.
I think the main issue around this was the people parking in some of those allotted bays, and obviously then going into town, which was then having an impact on some of the businesses around there, which were requiring those for customers and whatnot.
Is that the only reason why it's there? Because the businesses are, people are parking there and walking into town to spend their money?
There was some concerns raised from what I understand the report talks about, where it was reviewed, and there was feedback going on at that stage from users of that area, which is hence why they then started the community consultation period.
If that's the knock-on effect, we also look at how many 15-minute bays we have in the city because it's bonkers. So then that might free up a few things that people can sit there for 1 or 2 hours and go shopping as well then.
It's all part of parking review, I assume, which will happen constantly. Thank you. 10.42. City Bunbury Strategic Advocacy, Councillor Quain.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The advocacy topic, the first one, the City of Bunbury is advocating for. It talks about direct investment into housing options. Does that include infrastructure and easing constraints like contamination?
Yes. CEO.
The answer, you're correct, Mayor. The answer would be yes. It would be about that infrastructure and deconstraining that we need as well.
Would there be consideration to include some wording around that within that paragraph?
CEO, it's in
I
there.
can't remember, thank you, Mayor. So I can't remember the discussion, but I'm pretty sure I need to look at the previous version, Councillor Quain, because we have tinkered with this based on council feedback, but I'm happy to provide that separately because I'm sure with these, we did workshop them, as you know, a few weeks ago. So I can't remember the original words that were in there and what we changed them to, but I'll come back to you on that.
Yeah.
And just before you do, Councillor Quang, and noting there was a workshop, I think I was away during the workshop was going on, but I think there's a bit more background to some of this stuff as well, and there's some and I'm not sure if you were at that workshop as well, Councillor Quang, but I think there is some backing information which really details into what these actual pieces are. So perhaps it might be worth obviously just circulating that again, but yeah, continue anyway, Councillor Quang.
Yeah, I've got a couple more questions.
Sure.
And advocating for the bore, the optics. Thank you, Councillor Andrew, for that wording. Will that occur at both ends of the bore?
See ya.
Yes, Councillor Quain, it will, and the submission that all the Bungeo group of councillors put in covers both sides of the bore. So the impact both sides,
north and
north and
south.
south. Yeah.
Yep. And then my next questions are about how these advocacy pieces will be reflected in the various lobby groups that we subscribe to, and also WALGA zones. So I'm interested in how the city is and the council are planning to have these reflected in like the Bunbury Geographic Economic Alliance or the Regional Capitals WA, Australia, Southwest WALGA Zone and Bunbury Geograph Local Government.
Yeah, so Councillor Quain, obviously all those bodies are separate bodies, so where we have either members or representations on there which can provide feedback into where we're at. They'll have advocacy pieces as well, which hopefully will generally align with what we're doing. But of course, they've all got multiple members as well. So part of that workshop can be, or part of that work will be making sure that our representatives in those groups will be lobbying on behalf of our bits as well. But of course, they may have multiple people lobbying for different things on their advocacy pieces. And I think that's around obviously having advocacy topic, which is the general position where we're on things, as then opposed to advocacy for particular projects as well, which is probably a separate sort of conversation as well, where we go from there. But happy, I believe there may be a conversation coming up with a couple of those groups around then that position as well, and getting them, and as we've talked about a few times, then getting those groups to report back on what they're doing for us.
Yep, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Quinn. Any other questions on this? Councillor Gassett?
Mr. Mayor, without entering into debate, with our market community scoreboard highlighting safety as the biggest issue, I'm just wondering whether we can work safety into one of these advocacy topics. That's one question. For example, safety around the old train station.
CEO, do you have a response for that?
Yeah, possibly, yeah. And if so, Mr. Mayor, if people are open to it, would they be happy for me to move an amendment next week to include it perhaps, as Councillor Kosisek mentioned, in the fourth advocacy piece?
Seek advocacy piece. Yeah, I might just see if the CEO's got any comment on that, and even has to be taken on notice to get some words around that. Councillor Gassett, CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it probably relates to your previous question. There's further information that was provided at the workshop that showed the linkages and some of the more descriptive, so I haven't got that with me here, but we'll probably redistribute that because that may well demonstrate that. I think item 4, or the advocacy topic 4, is probably where you could, but if Councillor Gassett wanted to follow that up with me, we can certainly look at how we might see how we can build that into next week if that was something that Council wanted.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Gatsby, I thought you were talking about adding a 6th one, but you're talking about adding it into advocacy 4. Yeah, so let's we'll take that notice and get some of that working around the background and what exactly that City of Bunbury advocating for means and what the documents have in behind that as well. But if need be, it potentially can be adjusted.
Similarly, Mr. Mayor, studying, perhaps people might support an amendment to include that in the 4th advocacy piece, studying here. Education, yes.
Education, sure.
Yep.
Again, we'll just, have a look at when the other documents are raised.
So one more, it's probably the big one, Mr. Mayor. I don't know how I'm going to say it, but advocacy, and I know other councils have raised it, and that is homelessness. But also, if I can just highlight, Australian Human Rights Commission have pointed out that the number 1 cause of homelessness is family and domestic violence. And I'm just wondering whether we can work that into the first one, perhaps homelessness, and maybe include something about domestic violence. It is probably the biggest issue in Australia.
Sure. I think similar to what we've mentioned, CEO, we'll take that on notice and have a look what's in that background.
The only thing I would say, Mayor, though, is we did have a workshop to work through these. So we've done a fair bit of work to try and to do the workshop so we can be succinct about. So if we're going to open that up, maybe we send this back and do the workshop again rather than trying to make too many changes to what we discussed at that workshop.
We'll take the extra data that's been circulated, we'll work through that and have a look, and from there. So those questions will be taken on notice and then form for that for next week. Any further questions on this one? Thank you. We'll deal with the leave of absence next week. That brings us to a close. Thank you very much, councillors. Have a good rest of the week. Thank you very much.